The HSV Dauntless was not the kind of ship meant to fight an empire. At just over 300 meters in length, it barely qualified as a warship, more of an experimental corvette with a history of critical malfunctions. The hull bore scorch marks from previous misadventures, and its AI, Rita, had an unsettling habit of making passive-aggressive comments about system failures. And yet, it was humanity's only hope. Captain Elias Rourke stood on the bridge, arms crossed, studying the holographic display before him. A crimson mass of enemy fleet markers hovered in the void like a storm cloud ready to swallow them whole. 500 ships of the Tyranny's Imperium, an empire so vast, so ruthless, that species across the galaxy either bent the knee or were erased from history. Now, they had turned their attention to Earth. And here he was, in a barely functional warship, expected to stop them. "All right," Rourke said, breaking the tense silence. "Anyone got a brilliant plan that doesn't involve immediate and fiery death?" Lieutenant Orion Park, the youngest and most optimistic of the crew, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "We don't have to win. We just have to make them think they can't afford to fight us." Jinx Vasquez, leaning back in her chair with her boots on the console, smirked. "You mean bluff them? Like a high-stakes poker game, but with planetary genocide on the table." "Exactly," Park said, unfazed. "We make them believe humanity has a secret weapon, something terrifying, something they won't dare test." Rourke considered it. It was madness. Then again, conventional tactics weren't exactly an option. Dr. Tessa Voss, their chief engineer and resident miracle worker, frowned from her seat at the diagnostic console. Bluffing only works if they buy it. The Imperium isn't stupid. They'll demand proof. Jinx grinned. "Then we give them proof. Or at least something that looks like proof." A pause. Then Rourke sighed, rubbing his temples. "This is insane." "Insane is what we do best." Jinx pointed out. Rourke let out a slow breath and turned to the crew. "All right, we convinced the biggest, meanest empire in the galaxy that humanity has a doomsday weapon. A weapon we don't actually have. And we do this with a single, half-broken ship. Anyone object?" Silence. Then, one by one, they grinned. "Let's get to work," Rourke said. The plan came together in a whirlwind of sleepless hours. Dr. Voss rigged the ship's reactor to emit unstable energy readings, something that would look to enemy sensors like an experimental superweapon charging up. The ship had already been known for its unstable core. Now they would weaponize that reputation. Jinx, meanwhile, infiltrated enemy networks, planning false intelligence about Project Ragnarok. With a few well-placed leaks, she made sure Imperium analysts would stumble upon scattered classified human transmissions discussing a weapon capable of planetary destruction. The kind of weapon no one wanted to see tested. Lieutenant Park, their tactical mastermind, analyzed Imperium fleet doctrine. Their commanders were rigid, relying on predictable formations and overwhelming force. They had never faced an enemy willing to outthink them rather than outgun them. He plotted a course through the system, exploiting sensor blind spots and positioning Dauntless in a way that made it seem like they want to be seen, like a predator preparing to strike. And Rourke? He prepared to sell the bluff. The first test came faster than expected. An Imperium scouting detachment, 5 sleek war cruisers, intercepted them near the outer edge of the system. The lead ship hailed them, a towering alien with ridged violet skin and golden battle armor appearing on the holoscreen. "I am Admiral Zolvex of the Tyranny's Imperium. Identify yourself, human vessel." Rourke smiled, leaning back in his chair with casual arrogance. "This is Captain Elias Rourke of the HSV Dauntless." He let the name hang for a moment before adding, "Flagship of Project Ragnarok." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Zolvex's expression. "There is no record of such a project." Rourke shrugged. "That's because you weren't meant to know about it. But since you're here, tell me, Admiral, how fast do you think you can run?" Zolvex's mandibles tightened. "Explain yourself." Dr. Voss, listening from her station, activated the rigged reactor. On enemy sensors, the Dauntless now appeared to be building up catastrophic levels of energy, something wildly unpredictable and dangerous. Rourke gestured to the screen. "I assume your sensors are working." You're looking at a prototype weapon capable of wiping out a fleet with a single pulse. We didn't want to use it, but you forced our hand. Your move, Admiral." Silence. The Imperium ships hesitated. Even a fraction of doubt was enough. Then Zolvex did the unexpected. "I do not believe you," he declared. "If such a weapon existed, humanity would have already used it. We will board your ship and confirm the truth." Rourke cursed under his breath. Jinx whispered, "We've got 3 minutes before they try something. We need to sell this hard." Lieutenant Park leaned in. "Captain, I have an idea. We make them think we've lost control of the weapon." Rourke caught on immediately. "Voss, can you make this thing look like it's about to explode?" Voss grinned. "Oh, absolutely." A few button presses later, warning klaxons blared across the Dauntless. Lights flickered. Energy surged. On enemy scanners. It must have looked like a catastrophic failure. Rourke turned back to the holoscreen. "Congratulations, Admiral. You just made me push the wrong button." Zolvex's eyes widened as a sudden, high-pitched alarm rang through his own ship. Their own sensors, reading the surge, must have interpreted it as a full-scale weapons activation. Rourke grinned. "I'd start running if I were you." A moment of hesitation. Then Zolvex barked an order in his native tongue. The Imperium ships veered away at full speed, retreating as fast as their engines could manage. As soon as they disappeared from radar, Jinx let out a long whistle. "Holy hell, we actually did it." Lieutenant Park grinned. "One down, 495 to go." Rourke exhaled, shaking his head. They had just bluffed an Imperium admiral into running. It wouldn't last forever, but if they played their cards right, it would last long enough. "All right, team," he said, "we've got their attention. Let's make sure they never forget the day a single human warship made an empire kneel." The Imperium fleet was watching. From the moment Admiral Zolvex and his detachment fled, the HSV Dauntless had been under constant long-range surveillance. The Imperium was hesitant, too disciplined to attack blindly, too cautious to ignore the anomaly they had just encountered. And that was exactly what Captain Elias Rourke needed. On the dimly lit bridge, a holographic map displayed hundreds of red enemy signatures. The Dauntless sat alone, a single blue blip, surrounded by a storm of hostility. "They haven't moved," Lieutenant Orion Park muttered, arms folded. "They're waiting to make sense of us." "They're scared," Jinx Vasquez said with a grin. "And scared people make dumb choices." Rourke exhaled slowly. "Let's make sure their next dumb choice is the one we want." Selling the lie. The key to a good bluff wasn't just making it believable. It was making the enemy believe they had discovered the truth on their own. Jinx had spent the last few hours worming her way into the Imperium's encrypted communications, feeding misinformation into the right places. Carefully falsified reports from human intelligence leaks hinted at Project Ragnarok, a top-secret Earth military initiative capable of wiping out entire fleets. I even tossed in some spicy rumors that the weapon was unstable. Jinx said, popping a piece of gum into her mouth. "You know, just to keep things fun." "Define fun," Dr. Tessa Voss muttered, tightening a bolt on the reactor housing. She had modified their core's energy output to appear erratic, sometimes peaking as if on the verge of detonation, other times stabilizing like a controlled weapon priming for use. To an outside observer, it would seem like the Dauntless was barely containing an unpredictable force. "A fun situation," Jinx said, stretching, "is when our enemy is so paranoid they start freaking out over shadows." Park smirked. "I prefer a fun situation where we don't get vaporized if they call our bluff." Jinx shrugged. "Details." Rourke checked the latest intercepts. The Imperium's command network was abuzz with conflicting theories. Some officers demanded an immediate strike, but others hesitated. No species had ever faced humans in full-scale war. That uncertainty played in their favor. But hesitation wouldn't last forever. "Time for Phase 2, Rourke said. "We need to give them a demonstration." A spectacle of fear. Deep in the bowels of the ship, Dr. Voss and Park worked at a secondary console, jury-rigging an explosive overload sequence. "We can't actually destroy a planet," Voss reminded him. "We just need them to think we can," Park replied. Voss shook her head, muttering about military-grade stupidity, but her hands moved with practiced precision. A few minutes later, Jinx's voice crackled over comms. "All right, the Imperium's listening. Time to put on a show." The Dauntless drifted toward a barren moon orbiting a nearby gas giant. Nothing valuable, nothing inhabited. All systems primed, Voss confirmed. Ready to fake some Armageddon. Rourke took a breath. If this failed, they'd be dead within the hour. He opened a fleet-wide transmission, making sure the Imperium was listening. "This is Captain Elias Rourke of the Dauntless," he announced, his voice deliberately calm. "You have invaded human space. You have ignored our warnings. Now, you will witness the consequences." Jinx pressed a button. On enemy scanners, the ship's unstable energy reading spiked violently. At the same time, a powerful electromagnetic pulse burst from the Dauntless, scrambling long-range sensors. And then, a massive explosion engulfed the moon. Voss had detonated a cluster of mining charges hidden in the rock. From the Imperium's perspective, the lifeless satellite had been obliterated by an invisible force, one that had come directly from the Dauntless. Silence followed, then chaos. Imperium channels exploded with chatter. That was a warning shot. Rourke continued, watching the red enemy blip shift uncertainly. The next target won't be a moon. The enemy's response. On the bridge of the Imperium flagship, Supreme Commander Vryle watched the data feeds with narrowing eyes. The human so-called weapon had just destroyed a celestial body with no visible projectile, no discernible pattern of attack. A warrior race like the Tyrannies Imperium did not fear battle, but they feared the unknown. Vryle, second in command, a cold-eyed officer named Grauveck, clenched his fists. "It's a trick." "Perhaps," Vryle mused, "but even tricks can kill." "Then we must strike now, before they use it again." Vryle did not respond immediately. The data was maddeningly inconclusive. If the weapon was real, then engaging now could be suicidal. If it was a bluff, then waiting gave the humans more time to prepare. He looked at the screen again. The lone human warship remained unmoving, as if daring them to test its power. He would not take that risk. Not yet. A temporary victory. Back aboard the Dauntless, the crew exhaled as the enemy fleet pulled back slightly. It wasn't a full retreat, but it was hesitation. And hesitation was survival. Jinx spun in her chair. "We so just scared the pants off an entire empire." "I wouldn't celebrate yet," Voss muttered. "They'll analyze the explosion. If they figure out it wasn't us, then we keep them too paranoid to check," Park said. "We keep pushing the illusion. Make them think every moment of delay is a death sentence." Rourke nodded. "Exactly. We've made them hesitate. Now we make them kneel." Outside, the stars shimmered and the Imperium fleet loomed. The real battle had just begun. The Imperium wasn't running. Not yet. From the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain Elias Rourke studied the enemy formation. 500 ships still hung in space like an iron noose, their sleek black hulls reflecting the dim glow of the system's distant sun. They hadn't moved forward, but they hadn't left either. "They're waiting for confirmation," Lieutenant Orion Park murmured, trying to figure out if what they saw was real. "They're calling the bluff," Jinx Vasquez corrected, popping a piece of gum into her mouth. "We need to double down before they send someone snooping." Dr. Tessa Voss leaned against a console, arms crossed. "We're running out of tricks, Captain. I can't fake another moon explosion. They'll analyze the debris, realize it was conventional mining charges." Rourke exhaled slowly. The Imperium was cautious, but they weren't cowards. If they found proof that Project Ragnarok was a fabrication, they would descend on Earth with the fury of 1,000 worlds. Their only option was to make retreat seem like the safer choice. He turned to Park. "What's our best tactical move?" Park stared at the enemy formation, deep in thought. Then his eyes lit up. "We make them turn on each other." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "Go on." The seeds of doubt. Jinx's fingers danced across her console as she hacked deeper into the Imperium fleet's internal communications. The more she listened, the more she grinned. "They're already on edge," she reported. Some of the lower-ranking officers don't trust the brass. They're whispering about how command is holding back because they're scared of us. Rourke smirked. Good. Let's use that. Jinx cracked her knuckles. Time to get messy. With surgical precision, she planted falsified orders into the Imperium fleet systems, fabricated transmissions that made it look like certain admirals were considering retreat while others were pushing for an immediate attack. She forged encrypted messages hinting that some commanders were secretly willing to negotiate with the humans rather than risk annihilation. To the Imperium, it would seem like their own leadership was divided. Park monitored the fleet movements, eyes flicking between shifting red markers on a holographic display. It's working. A few of their squadrons are repositioning out of formation. They don't trust each other. Rourke grinned. Time to make them panic. A desperate maneuver. Dr. Voss, grim as ever, tapped her console. Captain, I should remind you that the Dauntless is currently being held together by hope, duct tape, and my sheer force of will. Rourke gave her an apologetic smile. And we appreciate your service, document. But I need you to do one more crazy thing. She sighed. Of course you do. The plan was simple. They would simulate a catastrophic weapons malfunction, something that looked as if Project Ragnarok was spiraling out of control. If the Imperium believed the weapon was unstable, they might assume that an attack on the Dauntless would trigger an uncontrolled detonation, and no one wanted to be the fleet responsible for blowing up half a star system. Voss grumbled as she tinkered with the reactor's energy output. All right, I've rigged the core to throw out nonsense energy signatures. To them, it'll look like we're about to blow ourselves up. Rourke nodded. Do it. The bridge lights flickered as the Dauntless began to tremble. Outside, the ship's hull groaned, vents releasing plumes of glowing plasma into space. To any outside observer, it looked as if the unstable human superweapon was on the verge of catastrophe. Jinx amplified the effect by hacking into the Imperium sensors, making sure their readings exaggerated the energy spike. Then Rourke opened a system-wide transmission. This is Captain Elias Rourke of the Dauntless, he said, voice steady despite the shaking deck. Our containment is failing. If we go down, we're taking everything within 100,000 kilometers with us. Park nodded approvingly. Now that's a threat. Imperium's breaking point. On the bridge of the Imperium flagship, Supreme Commander Vryle clenched his mandibles in frustration. The human warship was still standing, still defying them. And now, if the readings were to be believed, the so-called Ragnarok weapon was losing stability. His second-in-command, Gralvek, hissed, "We should attack now. If their weapon is failing, they are at their weakest." Vryle didn't answer immediately. His claws tapped against the armrest of his command chair. He had studied war his entire life. He had conquered civilizations, broken fleets, crushed rebellions. But never had he seen an enemy fight like this. One ship, one human ship, had held his entire invasion force at bay. And now his fleet was divided. Some of his officers believed the humans' power was real. Others were terrified of making the wrong move. If he ordered an attack and the humans did have such a weapon, the cost would be unimaginable. If he hesitated any longer, his own officers might turn against him. For the first time in his career, Vryle realized he had been outplayed. Slowly, he exhaled. Order the fleet to withdraw. Gralvek's eyes widened. Withdraw. Supreme Commander, if we... Vryle's voice was cold as steel. I will not gamble the Imperium's might on the madness of these humans. He turned his gaze toward the Dauntless, still burning like a wounded beast in the darkness of space. Let the humans keep their cursed weapon, he said. This is a war we cannot afford to fight. The tides turn. On the Dauntless bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence as the Imperium fleet began to turn away. Jinx let out a low whistle. No way. They're actually leaving, Park muttered, barely believing it. Voss leaned back against the console, rubbing her temples. I hate that this worked. Rourke let out a slow, victorious exhale. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had bluffed their way out of annihilation. But he knew this wasn't over. The Imperium wouldn't stay scared forever. Enjoy the moment, he said, standing tall. We just made an empire blink. Jinx grinned. Yeah, But now we gotta sell the lie forever. Rourke smirked. Then let's make sure they never forget the day a single human warship made an empire kneel. The Imperium fleet was gone. The moment the last enemy warship vanished into the void, the tension on the dauntless bridge shattered like glass. Jinx Vasquez let out a sharp whistle, rocking back in her chair with a satisfied grin. "We actually did it," she said, shaking her head. "We just punked the biggest empire in the galaxy." Lieutenant Orion Park exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I keep expecting them to change their minds." Dr. Tessa Voss, leaning against the reactor console, wiped grease from her forehead. "I can't believe we survived our own bluff." Captain Elias Rourke let their words wash over him, but his gaze remained on the hollow display. The Imperium had retreated, but the war wasn't over. "Not really. They'll be back," he said. "Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year. But eventually, someone in their chain of command will get bold enough to question what happened here." Jinx popped her gum. "Well, we just gotta make sure they never get bold again." Sealing the lie, the Imperium fleet had left behind a digital battlefield. Sensor data, transmission logs, fragmented recordings of the battle. The galaxy would talk, rumors would spread, and humanity needed to control the narrative. Jinx cracked her knuckles and got to work. "All right," she murmured, fingers flying across her console. "We can't erase every trace of this engagement, but we can exaggerate it." She hijacked enemy distress signals and forged new transmissions, messages implying that the Dauntless had barely chosen to spare the Imperium fleet. Carefully edited footage was seeded into pirate networks, making it appear as if the human warship had allowed the enemy to leave, as if Rourke himself had issued a chilling warning before letting them flee. By the time Jinx was finished, the legend of Project Ragnarok would be undeniable. "Anyone who looks into this battle is going to see a very different story," she announced smugly. "And the best part? The Imperium can't publicly deny it without admitting they ran." Park chuckled. "So if they try to save face, they'll actually make our lies stronger?" "Bingo." Rourke grinned. "Remind me to give you a raise." Jinx smirked. "Captain, we don't get paid." Voss sighed. "Can we at least get a functioning ship out of this mess?" One last gamble. The Dauntless was barely holding together. The reactor, pushed past its limits, would need a complete overhaul. Weapons were fried. Life support was running on borrowed time. They couldn't fight another battle. And that's when the distress signal came through. A garbled transmission, human in origin, flickered to life on the comms. The voice was strained, panicked. "This is UES Avalon, requesting immediate aid, Imperium raiders." Static swallowed the rest. A silence settled over the bridge. Rourke's crew had just risked everything to scare away an empire, but humanity wasn't safe yet. "Can we even fight?" Park asked quietly. Rourke looked at the damage readouts. Objectively, the answer was no. But that wasn't how humans worked. "We don't need to fight," he said. "We just need to be seen." Jinx caught on first, grinning. "We roll up looking like we're choosing not to fire, not unable to." Voss sighed heavily. "I hate that I'm agreeing to this." Park grinned. "Let's make the Imperium regret ever crossing us." A reputation forged in fire. The Dauntless limped into the system where the Avalon was under attack. 3 Imperium raider ships circled the damaged human vessel like vultures. The Dauntless broadcasted on an open channel. "This is Captain Elias Rourke of the HSV Dauntless," he announced. "Stand down, or we will deploy Project Ragnarok." The Imperium ships froze. Even across the void, Rourke could imagine the hesitation in their ranks. Jinx leaned in. "They're checking their comms. They know what happened. They know what we did." A long pause. Then, as if ghosts were chasing them, the raiders turned and fled. On the hollow display, the Avalon's captain, a weary-looking man with a bloodied temple, stared in shock. "Dauntless, I thought you were dead." Rourke smirked. "Not today." A slow grin spread across the man's face. "The whole fleet's been talking about what you did." He shook his head. "You realize what you started, right?" Rourke nodded. "Yeah. A legend. The war that never happened." Word spread fast. Across the galaxy, Whispers of the lone human warship that had defied an empire took on a life of their own. Mercenaries refused contract against Earth. Neutral species reconsidered their alliances. Imperium outposts went silent when human ships passed too close. And in Imperium's highest halls, debates raged. Supreme Commander Vryle said little of the battle. He did not speak of the human trickery, of the fear that had crept into his officers' hearts. Instead, he issued a single command: no war with humanity. Not today. Perhaps not ever. Epilogue. The Dauntless lives on. The Dauntless never saw a proper dry dock. Never got the repairs it desperately needed. But it didn't need them, because it was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's defiance, their cunning, their refusal to bow. As long as the Dauntless was believed to be out there, lurking in the void, the Imperium would hesitate, and that hesitation was victory. Jinx leaned back in her chair, staring out at the endless stars. "So, Captain," she mused, "what now?" Rourke grinned. "We keep the legend alive.